Welcome to Chicago Independent Television. Grassroots media workers from Chicago and beyond produce these progressive reports outside the bounds of commercial influence or support. I'm Chris Giovannis. In this episode, we'll see a report on attorney Lynne Stewart and how her struggle for freedom impacts civil liberties. And we'll also see a film about efforts in Chicago to challenge biotechnology propaganda and the corporate takeover of the food we eat. Stay with us.
Hey, what's this about?
What?
Andy crossed his name off the cleaning schedule?
He backed out of the cleaning schedule.
How can you just back out? How can he do that?
Well, he's the most powerful roommate. Don't say anything about it. Just whatever you do, don't...
Hey, Andy, you're not going to clean on Friday?
No. No, you mustn't.
Bathroom? Hey! That's reasonable. I'll do Friday as well.
Welcome back to Chicago Independent Television. Lynne Stewart is a New York-based human rights attorney who has been falsely accused of helping terrorists. Her battle to fight her wrongful conviction is part of the larger struggle to safeguard freedom of speech and civil liberties. This film from the Lynne Stewart Defense Committee tells us more about her case and its importance.
Today's indictment charges 4 individuals, including Rahman's lawyer, a United States citizen, with aiding Sheikh Abdul Rahman in continuing to direct terrorist activities of the Islamic group from his prison cell in the United States.
When they came to arrest me, I heard Ralph, my husband, who's African-American, out on the front stoop.
They were trying to come into the house. So, I blocked them. I says, who are you? And they says, well, I don't know what they said, the government, FBI. And I says, well, I don't see a warrant. I don't see a badge. As a matter of fact, I don't see anything. So I said, you can't come in. But just about this time, Lynn was coming down towards the little narrow door.
I stepped out and I said to Ralph, take it easy, take it easy. We'll have you out by lunchtime. Because he's the activist. He's the guy that gets arrested going to a PTA meeting.
And he said, we didn't come for you. We came for Lynn.
During the 60s, when I was I was 22 years old when I went to work in Harlem as an elementary school librarian.
Lynn, through her experiences, I guess starting teaching in Harlem and then with Ralph and all, had seen the other side of the coin.
One talks about the 60s, and the 60s were a wonderful time, to be young, to be active. And we were very active in the politics of the 60s.
Anti-war, anti-Vietnam War marches, and a lot of community work, particularly around control of the schools.
Looking back now, what I took from my mother growing up was the understanding that no one of us is better than the other. And what came with that was not prejudging anybody, because we were really all equal and everybody deserved to be treated equally.
But it was a generosity that had no racial boundaries and it had no class boundaries. And I think it made, especially me, my brother, and my sister, very different growing up.
One of the reasons I became a lawyer was to be a voice for the voiceless, to give really high-quality legal services, the best I could do for people that otherwise were not able to command that kind of lawyering.
Every case that I've ever known her to be involved in, she's always given 110%.
Very well respected by other members of the bar, by the judiciary, and very beloved by her clients.
I remember when she walked into the courtroom and I was being arraigned and she comes in and, I'm your attorney, and it was like my mom came to save the day.
She took a call from me at 9, 10 o'clock at night saying, oh my God, the police are at my door taking me out of my home again. So, she's a person that is really hands-on and really cares about you.
Anybody that once she started representing them, she was there for them, and no matter what they were charged with and where they came from, in terms of her advocacy for that person, she got totally committed.
She gives you this confidence that she's going to do, whether you win or lose, she's going to fight as much as she can for you. till she can't anymore. She's not going to turn around and give up on you.
The true American mom, the true American lawyer, the true American woman, the caring neighbor, a woman that is there for anybody. Anyone needs her.
I needed to see some justice done, and I thank God she was there.
The trials that I have done that are most outstanding to me, I think, would be the Brinks trial in the mid 80s, and of course my other greatest case, which I tried along with my dear friend and colleague Bill Kunstler, was Larry Davis. And then, of course, the Sheikh Omar case.
My brother called and said, well, I want to tell you this before you hear it on the news, that Mom got arrested.
Lynne Stewart is out on $500,000 bail after being charged as a co-conspirator in terrorism.
Stewart is accused of helping the terrorist Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman funnel information to supporters by distracting prison guards, then making misleading comments to reporters.
When I heard Lynne had been arrested, I was shocked. At first, when you hear the word terrorism, you think someone is evil.
Ashcroft flies from D.C. to New York City. John Ashcroft, Bush's former Attorney General. He flies to New York, and what does he do to generate maximum publicity? He announces Lynne indictment on the David Letterman show. How do you get a fair trial after that?
We simply aren't going to allow people who are convicted of terrorism to continue to achieve terrorist objectives by sending messages and directing the activity from their prison.
The average attorney would not have represented a person of that magnitude, but Lynne Stewart did.
Lynne had a client who was a convicted terrorist. There's no argument on that subject. He is as entitled to representation in this country as any other person is.
We felt a responsibility to protect his rights in prison. Prisoners have rights. They're very difficult rights to protect. He can't read, you know, he can't watch television, he can't understand English. He's held in solitary confinement. There's no one in the prison that speaks Arabic. We felt a duty to have his presence in prison in the United States remembered, have his condition there known.
If what we were trying to do for the client was to alleviate his suffering as a prisoner in a foreign land, we needed, as I said, to keep him alive, to keep his voice alive. And certainly people who are in jail are so powerless and so helpless in many, many ways that it's only the lawyer's voice that can speak for them at all.
SAMS is the shorthand form for what are known officially as special administrative measures. Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman is held in prison by the United States government under very strict restrictions that limit who he can communicate with. All of the lawyers who represented him agreed with the United States government to abide by those restrictions.
They told him, you can't talk to the outside world. And that also applied to his attorney, Lynne Stewart. So she wasn't supposed to talk to the outside world either. And she issued a press release to Reuters. The press release said that the Sheikh in prison thinks that the ceasefire over in Egypt, the Sheikh said he didn't think the ceasefire was working, and he thought the people over in Egypt should have a discussion about what they wanted to do about it. And that's how they got her for giving material support to terrorism. What was the material support? Her own client.
Over the course of representing Sheikh Rahman, a number of statements were made to the press. Ramsey Clark made them, Abdeen Jabara made them, Lynne Stewart made the ones that formed the basis for her indictment.
One might look at the face of this and say, but it was clear you couldn't do this. But it wasn't clear because we had done it, nothing had happened.
Lynne at all times acted in good faith as a lawyer. She certainly never intended to help Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman in his terrorist visions of the world.
The indictment charges that Rahman used communications with Stewart to pass messages to and receive messages from Islamic group members.
And so what Lynne did 2 years before now was viewed in a different light. Bush is now elected president, and now they're going to do to Lynne something they never did to anybody before for issuing a press release.
Prior to 9/11, I don't think that lawyers who came into contact with SAMs ever thought that violating a SAM would result in their criminal indictment. The Justice Department could cut you off from your client, and maybe if they really wanted to make a stink about it, they could file a complaint with the bar. But no one ever thought that they were going to charge you with some kind of a crime.
Apparently, the Clinton administration did not think it was all that serious, for she did this 2 years ago. And back then, the Justice Department barely slapped her wrist. It simply had her sign another statement that said that she would abide by the rules, including, "I shall not broadcast messages for Abdel Rahman to the media." And then they let her resume seeing the sheikh.
This trial comes along after 9/11 and down in an area that was affected by 9/11. And you have a post-9/11 jury. I don't think they could distinguish anymore.
The most common misperception about this prosecution is that Lynne and her client were indistinguishable. That her client had an agenda, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman had an agenda that he wanted to pursue, and that was Lynne's agenda. And it wasn't. And it isn't for lawyers. That's what we do for a living, is we represent people whose opinions and whose views and whose conduct may be reprehensible at times. But that doesn't make us reprehensible.
When I represent a client and he's a mafia guy, I don't go to work for the mafia. Just like if I represent a political person, I'm not working for whatever movement or group they were a member of. I work for that client exclusively. You know, you are who you are, the client is who the client is, but what they basically did was they mixed.
When the verdict came down of guilty, not just on some of the counts, but on everything, I was, just so saddened.
It feels as if it's not real. I mean, I know it's very real. There's nothing more real than a guilty verdict, but I was stunned by it. I think we all were very shocked by it.
I was stunned. I was just shocked. I looked at every single one of the jurors really closely.
It's like a bad dream. But I also knew that, struggle is not something that begins on Monday and ends on Thursday. You have to be in it for the long haul. And that if that's what it was going to take, well, then I was in it for the long haul.
It's been very difficult for all of us. But we also look at her and we all feel like, she's continuing to fight and go out. And if we think it's difficult for us, how must it be for her?
This isn't the time or the place to take on whether what Lynne did is a crime or not a crime. The jury has already determined that. But it is an appropriate place to comment on how do you treat a lawyer who is representing a client who has been convicted of crossing a line. And for that, you don't need to know Lynne, and you really don't need to know a lot of the facts. You need to know a little about the relationship between lawyers and clients. You need to know a little about how and when the government sets lines and moves lines. And those of us who are lawyers and who conform our conduct to where the line is are now going to wonder, will it be us who's caught on the wrong side of a line that has moved?
Well, my mother's conviction affects the legal community in particular in a huge way, because it affects how people are going to represent their clients.
I have to take into consideration that if Lynne can be made a target and was in fact made a target, that any of us can be made a target.
We have the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Every attorney should be concerned with a case where the subject of this speech is what has gotten Lynne Stewart into an accusation and now a conviction of lending material aid to a terrorist.
If you intend any fairness or any justice, you better respect rights. And the case of Lynne Stewart is, I believe, the gravest assault on the rights to legal representation in the history of this country.
I think she is very strong, but she's 65 years old, and many times she has said that she worries about all of us, about the children, because she is the grandmother, she's the mother, she is the institution of a family.
I cannot imagine what Lynne is going through, knowing that there's a possibility that she might go to prison for years and years and years and have to visit her family through a glass window and talk to them through a phone.
The people that would stand to lose the most is not my mother by losing her freedom, but the people who would not be helped by her not being out and able to practice law.
Boy, it's the 14th round, and we're losing. But I still have hope.
We have to educate people. We have to show that the rights that have been compromised here are our rights, not just Lynne's rights.
The most important thing we can do is to never let our spirits die around this issue, not solely because of Lynne, not solely because we love her, and we do love her, and we do think that what happened to her is unjust, but because it is a factor in terms of what might happen to all of us if we don't fight back.
I'd like to think that they never thought I would fight back the way I have, that they never expected me to come out of that courthouse door that day swinging and pointing out that they were the people who really deserved the scrutiny, not me.